Hey everybody, welcome back to Eat and Talk. Y'all, I always tell you guys when I interview someone and I say, I can't wait to see you back, I mean it. And today I have someone that I am more than blessed to call my brother, Jeff Aguy. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be back. I finally was able to get on. You know, it's hard to get on this podcast now. It's hard to get on this podcast. It's a lot of important people on this podcast.
That is true. It's a lot of important people. And, I always say, I save the best for last. So, and you guys, look at us. We're matching today. Like, we're always
This happens to us all the time, like unplanned.
All the time. No, it's crazy. I love it. Well, first of all, thank you for coming.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you. And so much has happened. You guys, the last time he was on our show, it was March of 2023. It feels so long ago.
Like 10 years ago now.
It really does. I was like looking back at it and I was like, why do we seem so young? And like,
we've grown up a lot in a year. A lot can change in a year and a half.
We've grown so much and so much has happened. So we're just going to dive into it. First of all, I have a lot more new viewers and followers. So we're going to have to do a new introduction
In other words, more success, more life, more blessings.
Thank you. Everybody already knows Jeff, but for those of us who aren't familiar, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, hey, everyone, if this is your first time on this episode and you weren't here last March 2023, my name is Jeff Aguy. I own a economic development firm where we advise Fortune 500 CEOs, city officials like mayors and foundation leaders on really how to grow regional economies. But that's what I do for my work. But in general, what I think I'm most about is helping to build the America that we all deserve. And I really believe that. I really believe that the American dream, even though for some people it's been a nightmare, but the reality is that the American dream is possible. That's why my dad came to this country, and I work every day of my life trying to make that more possible for more people.
Right. I love that. And okay, I could just like dive in. Tell me how 2043 started.
Yeah, so funny. I don't think I've ever shared this part of the story. So 2043 started when I took a 100% pay cut to work at this accelerator that was helping to grow startups founded by women and people of color. I really believed in it because I wanted to go into venture capital and everything was going really well, but I got fired. The only job that I've ever worked at that wasn't my company, because I really wanted to get into venture capital and thought this would be a really good experience, and ended up getting fired with my wife 7 months pregnant. And as I was thinking about what to do next, this was in 2019, late 2019. So this is where venture capital, a lot of people are starting new venture capital firms, especially women and a lot of Black people, a lot of people of color.
Yeah.
But 2043 started because I realized in venture capital, if you invest into 2 out of 20 companies that do well, then you really did it. So in general, 18 companies will fail out of every 20. And that's if you're doing it really well. And so I thought to myself, like, okay, venture capital is cool. You're trying to find the right startup. But if you think about the right startup that you want to invest to grow like a seed, it's really hard to pick like the right seed that's going to grow. Right. And I thought in my mind that there's a different methodology that we could probably do. So instead of focusing on the individual seed, why don't we focus on the soil? Why don't we focus on the environment? So a person doesn't have to be a superhuman or a super company that has all these top line people on their team and have all this experience. If we have the best environment, then if you have a good idea and you're committed, then your company should be successful. And so 2043 really focuses on working within the context. So working with corporations, working with cities, working with foundations to create the economic context that makes it easier to start your business and to scale. So that's kind of like how we were started. We started 2043, and then 2 days later, the pandemic happened.
Oh, the pandemic.
So yeah, it was. It feels like it was 10 years ago now, right?
It really does. Okay, so then how did that shift gears in 2020?
So it had to be God, because right when the pandemic happened, we were working with Knight Foundation, Jai Winston, the Knight Foundation director in St. Paul at the time, and Fong O'Neill. They were really forward thinking. And right when the pandemic happened, there was a need to understand how could we transform and how do we even understand what's going on?
Right.
And so our big first project was with Caroline Karanja. At the time, she had a company, 26 Letters. And we started this national survey on what entrepreneurs need. And so we were able to very early on get a deep understanding of what was happening on the ground, get a deep understanding of what entrepreneurs needed to succeed. And we were able to transform that data and use it to advise foundations, to advise cities, to advise states on the best way that they could support entrepreneurs. So literally, right when the pandemic happened, it created an opportunity for exactly what I was talking about. How do we create a better context for people to be successful? And it had a tremendous impact on people's lives. But I do want to focus on the funny part about that, right? Real quick, if you got a little bit of time.
Yeah.
The cool thing about that is, so pandemic happened. I knew we had to get a deeper understanding of what was happening with entrepreneurs because it was a new market. Nobody knew how to do this. I went to my friend Dario, who owns this company, Youth Lens 360. I was like, hey, Dario, listen, I can't promise you that I'm going to be able to pay you in time, but I don't have the money. But we need to record a video talking about this survey that we're building. And Dario was like, all right, I got you. Like, just pay me back when you can. Like, this is before we had any funding, anything. So I went to Dario, we recorded the video, and we were able to get so many answers from entrepreneurs. And then we went to Knight Foundation and said, hey, we're building this thing. We don't have any capital. I know you all are funding entrepreneurs and the world is changing. And so would this be something that you're interested in funding? And they were like, yes. And that was like our first contract. But it wouldn't have happened if Dario didn't record a $10,000 video for us, not knowing whether we would ever make any money. And so those are like the stories of relationships and connections and friends that you break bread with and go way back. And that's how you make change. Without that, I'm not sure we have a company.
Absolutely.
And now we work on some of the biggest projects in the country. So
yeah, and we'll kind of talk about like where we're at now. But I'm curious to know the answer that you guys were looking for in the survey. What makes entrepreneurs successful?
Yeah, so the following year, with one of our connections, ended up introducing us to the University of Chicago. So then our company partnered with the University of Chicago and Knight Foundation to do a country-wide research project. So not just the survey, but a research project. And we did quantitative research, qualitative research. They interviewed some of the top people across sectors to figure out what is the magic sauce that makes these entrepreneurial ecosystems effective. So we looked at really effective entrepreneurial ecosystems. Like we looked at Atlanta, we looked at Austin, we looked at Boston, we looked at Chicago, and then we kind of looked at what was emerging in the Minneapolis, St. Paul region. And what we found generally, there are three kind of key ingredients in order to have a successful ecosystem or to have a successful region. The first one is you have to have the kind of institutional factor. So you got to have the institutions. You got to have large companies that the startups can do business with. You know, you got to have banks that are willing to loan to entrepreneurs. You got to have a good investor community. You got to have cities and states that are really supportive of entrepreneurship. So that's like the institution one. That one wasn't really too, okay, yeah, of course you got to have institutional factors. Then there's got to be the environmental factors where, okay, is this a place where you can take a risk and fail and it'll be okay? Like in the best places, you want to fail and fail fast. That if you make a mistake or if you fail, no one's looking at you as a failure. As a matter of fact, the more you fail, the faster you could succeed. So that those environmental factors where even think about your home. Like in your home, is there a culture of risk where your family's encouraging you to try your best, or is it follow this narrow path that's already been tried? So there's those environmental factors. That didn't surprise me too much. What really surprised me, not that because I always knew that in my heart, but the research hadn't shown it before. So the groundbreaking piece of it was, what we found was that the most important factor in growing entrepreneurship or growing businesses in these kind of environments is the linkage factor. That is, people in our culture, we call it the plug, you know, somebody who's going to plug you in and do all those things. People or organizations that what they do is just connect people together. It's from those connections that you get the scale. And so we started a whole initiative after that called Humans Get Together that brought people together. A lot of the friends that we know now are from from Humans Get Together. But that idea of linkage is something that we've always known in our hearts and our culture, is that it's really about connecting with people. It's really about building trust. And that's why a lot of DEI initiatives didn't work, because, you know, you can't force people to connect.
Right.
You can't force people to build trust. When you're writing that $1 million or $500,000 check, it's not just about you have a great idea. It's about that relationship or someone who knows you made the introduction.
Right.
And so those linkage factors is the most successful aspect of growing your startup, of growing any venture, is you got to have those individuals and those institutions that are committed to just bringing people together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you mentioned that's the reason why that the DEIs failed. Fast forward to now, 2024. Now we have completely started wiping DEI out of companies, Fortune 500 companies. Why do you think that is? Do you think that that gap was just never bridged back again? Or do we think that there's been different discrepancies and inconsistencies that have happened?
I mean, so funny story about, not even funny, like, I've been telling people for the past 5 years, because a lot of people wanted us to go into the DEI space. And I just always knew that that was a bubble. It was going to burst. A lot of times people don't realize in business, things are market driven. So you have to understand the game in order to play it effectively.
Right.
And some people, they ignore the game altogether. That's a type of person. Okay, that's understandable. Some people, they see the game and they're like, we don't want to play it. And then some people are really great at playing the game. And you have to be really great at playing the game. My favorite definition of power is from the president and CEO of McKnight Foundation, Tanya Allen. She defines power as the ability to rewrite the rules.
Yeah.
The reality is, the challenge with a number of DEI initiatives before it was that it was market driven. So something happened in the market, and if you weren't doing DEI as a company, it would affect your customer base. So like, a lot of your customers wouldn't buy your products. You wouldn't be the model organization. So if you look at a lot of companies, of course they were doing DEI. It was being helpful. Like, a good example of this is a lot of people made pledges. Well, a lot of time those pledges were coming from their marketing budgets. It wasn't coming from their R&D. It wasn't coming. So when an organization made a DEI commitment and it was a big news, from the earned media that they generated from making that big news in terms of clicks, in terms of reputation, they already made the money that they're probably actually going to invest. So it was a market-driven kind of thing. So that's the first thing. You should know that, but most people, they didn't recognize that. The second part is, a lot of times within organizations, folks would be in DEI roles that had no power. So in many ways, it wasn't a position that the DEI vice president or had actual, in some spaces, those organizations didn't even have staff. In other places, even if they did have staff, they didn't have the power to actually change things. The third thing is, in business, if it doesn't move the bottom line, you only have a short period of time to move the bottom line, which means, how is this helping make the company make money? Regardless of how moral a cause is or idea. And a lot of times, I think one of the biggest challenges is that a lot of folks looked at DEI from a moral standpoint, in terms of, this is the right thing to do because of all the problems that have existed in the past. And don't get me wrong, those problems have been real, well documented, but nobody cares, really. Right. At the end of the day, moving forward, nobody cares. And so what you're seeing now is the market is saying, if you focus on DEI, you might get canceled by a different group of consumers. And those consumers have a lot more than the consumers who were for, quote unquote, DEI. So you'll see a lot of companies that are backtracking from that because they don't want to get boycotted by their customers. So it's like a market driven solution. And so if you think about it from that standpoint, you only have a short window to make change. And you got to be so effective at it. It has to be such a value to the company that if you go away from it, you're going to lose money. So what do companies lose? What do companies lose moving away from DEI?
Right.
Almost the same. What did they gain from doing DEI? So it's like, from that standpoint, that's how companies look at it. They look at the bottom lines. And you think about it, also people were flush with cash in 2020, 2019, individuals and companies. So they had the opportunity to do things that were in many ways outside of the bottom line, or as they saw it. But now, most people are living off of their credit cards. Americans are 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Most Americans don't even have $1,000 in their savings. Most of the economy that's being driven is driven by credit card debt. So people aren't giving to the things that they said they were giving, especially after the murder of George Floyd. And then companies are trying to increase their bottom line. So they're like, hey, we're going to do what makes sense. And then, what's happening federally, as you know, this next president that's coming in has said, hey, if you're doing DEI, we're going to cut off your federal funding. And so a lot of people are like, we don't want that federal funding to get cut off. So it just comes back down to the bottom line. So you got to ask yourself, whatever you're doing, are you gaining power? Are you having the ability to rewrite the rules? And so for me, I don't even engage in conversation with people anymore unless it's on the basis of power. Like I care about things, but at the end of the day, it's like, are we actually making things move? I have 2 kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. I think about their future all the time.
Yeah. So. And I think it was interesting, even with the whole DEI, I thought it was interesting how after the murder of George Floyd, or like during the time when it was at its peak with, everything was so fresh, that's when companies all of a sudden started like...
Yeah, market driven.
Pocketing it out and, coming out with DEI. And I also found it very interesting how these DEI leaders were not... people of color, or they're not what you would expect when you're thinking about diversity and inclusion. You would have like a 60-year-old Kenneth who's, came from, that used to work for a Kit Kat company or something, and then was like moved down to Chase to handle DEI. It was very, I don't know, it was very confusing and shuffling, but I do find it interesting, like how it's mentioned, it's almost like a business. It's part of like a strategic plan where it's like it's no longer...
Everything is market driven for business. That's what I try to tell people. The definition of business is good or services for profit. And a lot of us don't recognize that at the end of the day. So if you're not making money, I've learned this. I've went broke several times. So I'm not speaking from a place of somebody who haven't experienced that. Like I've in many ways had done so many things for free while my business was suffering, right? But if you're not making money, you can't actually do the other stuff that are important to you. So the business has to make money. And that's just the capitalist society that we live in. And so if the company is not making money, they're going to cut staff. If they're going to cut staff, they're going to cut staff from the places that they think are not going to hurt their business. You're never going to cut staff from your growing place. Like you're never going to cut staff in the places that are making you your money. And so if you want to have impact, you got to be making the company some money.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Well, I kind of want to talk a little bit about, the next few years ahead, and let's talk. I've been waiting for this. I was like, I've been dying to have a conversation about the elections.
Okay.
So let's get into it. I'm not even going to ask you a standard question. What are your thoughts of this year's election?
I mean, so I never really talk politics publicly, so
I haven't either. So
it's
don't cancel us, you guys.
It's interesting. Well, I think a couple of things. I predicted the results of this election.
You did.
I was telling everybody who I know this was going to happen. A lot of people were mad at me saying it and felt like, well, you're not being hopeful or whatever else. But fundamentally, this is what I think happened during this election. There was a candidate who spoke to the things that people cared about. I'm talking about the majority of people cared about. And there was a party and a candidate that did not, that spoke to what they think people should care about. Whether you like what Donald Trump was saying or the tenor he was saying, I'm from Haiti. You know what I mean? Like I'm an immigrant. My father came here on a boat. But I recognize that immigration is a big issue for a lot of people. Even if you don't like what he was saying about immigrants or immigration, the fact that he was saying something, that was a big deal. Another big deal, like everyday Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
Only about 35% of Americans have college degrees. And there was a candidate and there was a party that was speaking to those everyday Americans about the economy and the challenges that were happening. And there was a party that was saying, oh, the economy is doing great. Everything's fine. We're making this about joy. When literally people don't know how they're going to pay their bills. It's like, yeah, there's the numbers, but then there's what people individually are going through. These are the conversations that are having at barbershops and beauty salons and where everyday Americans are at. So there was this there was this party and then there was a party who waited to the last minute to change out who they think should run. Like, y'all should have had that conversation a year ago.
Yeah, only 100 days.
100 days.
Yeah.
So it's like, what did y'all expect, right? So these are the things that I think. And then, you know, we're on multiple wars on multiple fronts, which most Americans don't want to be happening. And there was a party who was in charge when those wars were happening. And there's a person who came and said, hey, we're gonna end these wars. Like, these are the things that people care about. Like, and that was what it was about. Who was talking to everyday Americans and who wasn't. And you saw that as a result by the popular election, the popular vote, how that ended up happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it was very interesting. And, you know, my whole thing about that was just watching how one party, how they decided to run their campaign, and also all of the I guess endorsements, as you can call it, and how that really shifted. Did you feel like at one point that they had a chance?
I think they had a chance when there was a transitioning from Biden to Harris to really shift what the messaging was, and they never did. And I think when people are very displeased with the economy and you ask the presidential candidate a question about what you would have done differently than what's been happening the last 4 years, and they said they would have done the exact same things. Like, I feel like you lose a lot of people 100%. There.
100%.
And I feel like, you know, the world has shifted. And I think the Democratic Party was living in 2016 and how they marketed and who they marketed with. You know, they spent $1 billion and they're still, now the campaign is in debt. It's like, where were you guys spending this money at in terms of the everyday people that mattered on the streets? And it was this idea of like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that the Democratic Party didn't have like good ideas. It was just like they communicated these ideas very poorly. And it gave an air of elitism. Like, even when you look at, you know, a couple of the senior advisors for Kamala went on the podcast, I think it was Pod Save America, and they were giving the reasons why Kamala lost, or the reason why they lost, and they were blaming the media, they were blaming everybody, but wasn't it y'all who was advising? Like, they're not taking any accountability. Oh, you know, we did this poorly, we didn't ask. The voter turnout was terrible. Like, it was like, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say sexism or racism don't exist. I'm not one of those people who try to say they don't exist, but y'all know, did we not know these things existed before you know, the person decided to run? So it's like, what did y'all do about that? Like, how were you communicating to people?
Not only that, I think, like you said, there was a huge gap between the working class citizens, but not only that, there was a huge gap between the students, like college students.
Oh, you saw that, right? You saw that.
Yeah, because in what I've never seen as long as I've been an adult, someone completely skipping over the voices of college students, first-time voters. Like, those are the voices and the opinions who really do drag in your race, and it was completely neglected, you know?
Yeah, I think that you got to go out there and earn people's votes, and you got to be out there. If you're a leader, you got to go out there in the, I'm trying to find the right words, but it's like, you have to be able to go where the fire is and where it's tough. You got to be able to answer those tough questions. You got to be able to be in those tough meetings, in these tough rooms. And historically, college students have, if you look at back in 2008, I was in college, that's what propelled Barack Obama. That was like the record turnouts, right? A lot of these things. But if you look at the college campuses, you got to be able to have these tough conversations. And I think a lot of those votes were taken for granted because historically, younger people historically vote Democrat, no matter what. That's just what usually happens. And just like historically, you know, people who identify as black and brown typically vote Democrat, and they typically have good turnout. So I think there could have been a over reliance on thinking that was going to happen. And, you know, you had to go to these students and talk about, hey, this is why these decisions have been made, and we want to hear what you got to say. Like, there's this idea that when you're a leader, you got to go where the people are at. And that's just how I feel. Like, I feel strongly about that. I feel strongly about, you know, you got to be able to answer the tough questions, and people got to know where you stand. And think about it, right? For a large part of even though it was 100 days, you didn't know where the candidate was because they didn't have her doing any interviews or talking to anybody. So you were left wondering, what's the position? What's going on? And so I think that the inability to go talk to everyday people and when I say everyday people, it's not like a stigma, everyday people. I mean, like, everyday people are everyday people.
Yeah.
Everyday people are people who are working their behinds off to feed their families. There are people who depend on these policies in order to move forward. There are people who are the most hurt when government is inefficient. There are the people who are first in line when the economy is not working like it should. And that was like the number one issue. And so when you're talking to all these other things that, I'm not trying to say they don't matter, but they don't matter to large groups of people.
Yeah.
And there was a candidate who, whether you like what he was saying or how he was saying it, he was speaking to the people. And for the first time in I don't know how many decades, the polls have shown that majority of Americans identify the Democratic Party as the party of the elite and the Republican Party as the party of the people. This is the first time that's happened in multiple decades.
Yeah.
So you can't just blame isms on that. There's a there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I think also they wasn't listening to people on the ground, to be honest with you, because I know people was telling them what's up. Like, it's not like, that's the other part. It's like, that's a little bit of hubris. When people on the ground are telling you something, but you know better, you know best, it's given you think you know better than the people who are experiencing what they're experiencing. And those people ended up making you pay that price with their lack of going to vote, with their voting uncommitted, or with their vote of voting for somebody else.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, that just is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel like, and this is a lot of the conversations that happen when I'm like listening to NPR or all of these radio or news stations, do you feel like this needed to happen in order to start over for the Democratic Party, the way the Democratic Party was already heading? Do you feel like it needed to, quote unquote, burn to the ground and just start all over?
I mean, I just use this analogy. I think if you're a kid and you saw your mom put their hand or your dad put their hand on the stove and it burned, if you're a kid, you're gonna be curious to try it. If you're an adult, you should know what it looked like when somebody's in pain. And I think you don't have to wait for something drastic to happen in order to change. And I think that's part of, and it happens in business, it happens everywhere, like where, if you don't know what your customers are really thinking, if you grow so distant from what's happening on the ground, then that's on you. And I'm not convinced that, quote unquote, folks have learned a lesson or not. I'm not convinced. I haven't seen what makes it different. Like, and I think it'll be different if the next DNC chair is Ken Martin out of Minnesota. Because if you look at the stuff he's putting out, it's like, hey, we need to talk to everyday people. Hey, we need to be more grassroots. Hey, like if you look at what he's saying, it's a little different than what they did. But if it's another DNC chair, or I gotta see what it looks like.
See what we're working with.
It's I mean, I've always been in community. I've always been somebody who's been in organizing. So those are my roots, and since I was like, 7 years old. And at the same time, I'm a business guy. So it's like, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense.
Right.
I'm just one of those believers where we're gonna see what happens. But that's where I think everyday Americans have to stop, waiting on their elected officials to make the change that they want to see. I think that the issues are just too nuanced and, too drastically, lives of people that are living in urban and rural and depending on how you identify are too drastic for us to just depend on our elected officials. I think we, everyday Americans, got to start leading that conversation where now people got to just like anything, people got to earn your vote. They got to talk about what you care about. They have to produce real sound solutions that matter. Like, it's not just about this kind of theoretical perspective of where the country need to be at. And I think we as everyday Americans have an opportunity to hold people accountable over these next 3 to 4 years. And so I'm not necessarily one of those people who feel like this had to happen to a party or that party, as much as whether what had to happen or didn't happen. If the people don't change their behavior, then the folks trying to earn your vote won't change theirs.
Right.
And like, once people know there's a price to be paid for not listening, because elections are mainly 2-year cycles. They're not really 4-year cycles. Right. You know what I mean? So it's like,
true.
They're on the clock.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, during the election times, and you mentioned this, briefly, obviously your background, you're from Haiti and your dad is from Haiti. And there was those remarks.
Yeah.
And I'm, what was going through your mind, and did that affect you and your family? I know you wrote an article about
Yeah,
it as
yeah.
well.
Like I would say a couple of things. Hell no, it didn't affect me personally because, you know, we're resilient people, man. Like, you know, what bothers you if you don't know where your next meal is coming from. What bothered me as a kid was when we was in a virtual, like literal civil war, and you wondered if you were gonna die the next day, if somebody were gonna come and raid your, like, those are like big issues.
Yeah.
But it did affect a lot of people who I know, in the sense of like when you kind of brand something like that about people. Like, I don't know if you know this, but in the early 1980s, like the health department said that AIDS came from Haiti and from Haitians. It was totally false, not true, but it gave this kind of stigma about being Haitian. So a lot of people, until like about 2000, people were even scared to say that they were Haitian. Some people would be like, they're Jamaican or they're from France or all this kind of stuff to avoid saying they were Haitian, because the U.S. Health Department made this false claim. And so we are used to being kind of scapegoated and people saying things about us that's not true. But I think it has an impact on people. It has an impact on kids. It has an impact on, you know, when your 7-year-old is like, when their friends at school are making fun of them for eating cats. Like that has an impact on your kids growing up. So it was a pretty messed up situation. And then so many people were hitting me up. Then it became like, oh, dang, like, this is something. And, you know, I'm blessed to have a platform. I'm blessed because so many people have invested in me and so much of my community has invested in me to be where I am. I was able to kind of write to that. And, you know, I didn't pull any punches. My article started with JD Vance is wrong. That's it, point blank. And I don't think that's a political thing as much as it's a fact. You're factually incorrect. Like, this is not true. And you know, writing the article, it was emotional for me because I do remember what it was like growing up, you know, being Haitian and some of the negative stereotypes associated with that just stuff that wasn't true. But at the same time, it also reminded me of, okay, well, it's like, we got to stop with the outrage. If the outrage don't make you go do something, I don't believe it's real.
Say it again.
You know, it's like a lot of people are outraged. I don't believe.
What are you doing?
I don't believe the outrage. I think a lot of times people just do stuff for social media. People do stuff for, like, it's socially cool to be outraged. It's socially acceptable to be outraged. If you outraged and all you're doing is posting, I don't believe it.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think it was like the thing with a lot of people. Or when people say, not in our country, I can't believe this is happening. It's like, there are people who've been living in this country the whole time, have been experiencing these things that we're talking about. So I think that's the other part about the election too, where it was like, people were like, or it's like the thing about Puerto Ricans. And people were like, yeah, no, Puerto Ricans were definitely not voting for Trump because they're, and you look at the numbers, you see what it was with Latino men. Stop it. People just be fake outraged a lot of times. And so I don't know. I just feel like as an immigrant, it made me feel a sense of responsibility to correct the rhetoric that was false, because it does impact how people feel about themselves. But in the grand scheme of things, like, you know, I was, people was like, how are you? I'm good.
Yes.
I'm doing something. You know what I mean? And I think too, like, Yusra, like, I think you, so I just want to give you your flowers real quick. I know it's your interview.
Oh, here we
your
go.
Podcast. No, for real though, like, I think that there's a lot of people who do the talk. Like, even like we're talking about eat and talk, right? But you do a lot of the walking. And for me, that's what inspires me, because I'm around people that are doing the walking most of the time. I know that I live in a bubble because of that, but I'm always extremely hopeful about the future because I'm not around the complainers. I'm around the doers. And so I see the doing that's happening behind the scenes, and all the people that are working hard like you, especially as you think about how you're helping small business owners and all the stuff that you're doing on Lake Street and otherwise. It's like, yeah, you have a podcast. Yeah, you have a platform. Yeah, you have a voice. Yeah, you're talking, but you're doing the work. And so for me, I think it's the responsibility of leaders to do the work. Like, if it's someone who's not responsible for others, who's not responsible for other people's paychecks, who's not responsible for other people's livelihoods, and I think that's okay if they complain. But if you're a leader, I believe that it's okay to talk about the challenges if you're doing something to solve it. If you're not, I'm just in a space in my life where I'm not trying to hear that. Like, And so that's where I think that was happening during the election. It was just so, and even after the election, it's so much, I'm not going to say fake outrage because it's real in terms of the elections have real consequences. But what y'all going to do, cry for 4 years? Like,
Yeah.
it's like family.
Right. Exactly.
I don't know, am I tripping?
No, you're
am I tripping for
100%.
that?
No, 100%. And I honestly believe like that is one thing. I do believe in the power of protesting, but then what? You know, what are you doing after you stop marching?
Yeah.
What is the groundwork that you're putting in? Who are you reaching out to? Like what role? It can be a very small role.
Yeah.
Everyone has different capacity levels, different, you know, gifts that they can utilize.
Yeah.
Like the things that I'm good at, you're not good at. The things
Yeah.
that you're good at, I might not be good at. So it's like, but what are you doing? You know?
Listen, so I said it 7 years ago when I was the economic development chair and vice president for the Minneapolis NAACP, and I stand by it today, just like I did 7 years ago. I said disruptive innovation is our best form of protest.
Yeah.
Because protest, and I was supporting folks. I was out there. I was with community. You know, I was there with, you know, young people when they were jailed, and a lot of these leaders who had them marching on the highways doing the most. Now the kids are in jail, and you're like, where are these people? Like, and these kids now about to get stuff on their record. It's going to affect their Pell Grant. They wasn't nowhere to be found. But that's a different story for a different day. But like, you know, protesting is about raising awareness. So if people are already aware of the issue, like protesting doesn't help. In many ways, what's happening is you're just creating more trauma for yourself. And so I'm not against people organizing. I actually think organizing, no matter what the issue is or where you're from, is a very important thing to do, because organizing is how you move ideas. Organizing is how you move people. Organizing is how you move capital. But I think I have not seen the protest that has worked in modern times. I just haven't seen it personally. And I've been around a lot of people when I've seen the trauma of those protests, especially when you're going against systems and things like that. So for me, I'm just like, okay, what are we doing here? Because a lot of times people are protesting because they want to be heard. And that's cool. That's important. But I don't want to be heard. I want to be felt. And I don't just want to be felt. I want you to do the thing. Like, if we need to have results at this point of this juncture in 2024, 2025, if it ain't producing results, then what are we doing?
Right.
And so that's where I think sometimes we can overly rely on being heard or wanting to be heard. And then at the end of the day, what are the results? Like, did we actually accomplish what we set to do? And that's the hard part. That's what requires for people to work together. That's what requires for people to put their egos to the side. That's what requires for people to not be so caught up in their own world and actually work together. And that's the hard part. And so if we're not willing to do the hard things, then we're going to keep getting those same results that we've been getting. And I'm not blaming people who are experiencing challenges for their own challenges. What I'm saying is that if the goal is to change, then we got to do things differently. Absolutely. And I just think protesting innate is not it. You know, that's just
I hear
my
you.
strong take.
I like that organizing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got to organize this. And if you look at the 60s, the 50s, what was most effective, like, was the organizing. The protest was to raise the awareness of what was already organized. The protest was to get to the negotiation table. But the organizing was, think about like the Montgomery bus boycott. Think about how it lasted over a year. Do you think today we could organize something that will last more than a year? Because during the first week, people on social media, people doing all those things, and it's getting a lot of likes, a lot of views. But like, did you organize? Did you know who are going to be the folks who are picking up people, who's going to be doing the carpool? Organizing takes a lot of work.
It does.
And, you know,
it does.
And so even at a business level, if you're a CEO, your role is to organize. Your role is to organize the investors or the funders. Your role is to organize the new customers. Your role is to organize your leadership team. So that organizing is really fundamental to what has allowed America to be America, because the American dream didn't build itself. It took everyday people at different junctures to organize to make it what it was. But I think we focus on the protest without having done any of the other stuff.
Absolutely. And I only really learned that. I feel like I've always unintentionally been an organizer, but this year I've intentionally started doing groundwork organizing for small business communities in the Twin Cities. And I realized, wow, it is a junction. Like it takes a lot of work, and so, but it's been the most effective.
It's effective. And that's the thing, right? And this is coming from somebody who's had gotten their car blown up before, like
we're gonna talk about that.
Going up on my 7-year anniversary of a car being blown up, and I don't really
okay, can we talk about that a little bit? I'm sorry, like we can't just brush past that. 7 years ago, someone blew up your car intentionally.
Listen, 7 years ago, and I rarely have talked about this, right? But the reason why I didn't talk about it is because it would have made a lot of news back then, but I didn't want to be known for the guy who got his car blown up. And so I wanted to be known for the person who's making change. I wanted to be known for the person who's really transforming economies for the everyday person. And so I just didn't even want to focus on that, even though it had like a big impact on my family. So pretty much my wife's getting off of work. It's 5 a.m. I'm in Arizona. I'm on my way to come back home. So last day I'm on my way to come back home. I'm in Arizona. My wife's getting off of work, and at the time she worked overnight, and she's getting in the car, like push start our car, getting in the car. She's about 20 feet away from the car.
That's like a movie.
It's a movie. I'm sleep. I got all these missed calls. I wake up. My wife is panicking. It's wild. Like the car's blown up, and they came, they called the fire ambulance, and they didn't want to do a report for real. It was just a real weird situation. The weirdest part, I don't even know if I want to talk about this publicly, but the weirdest part about it was like a few years, because I had been telling people during that time, I'm like doing stuff in NAACP, economic development, da-da-da-da. I have been telling people, like, somebody listening to my call, like I'm in the car. I felt like I was being watched. It was like, felt like it was like the 1960s.
I mean, I'm
25, feel like I'm being watched. Well, 26, feel like I'm being watched, all kind of things. And, and ironically, they had a whole New York Times article come out a few years ago in the DOJ about how MPD was surveilling NAACP leaders.
Yeah.
When they say during this time period, this was when I was the vice president and economic development chair. So there was a lot of funny business happening. I don't ever lump all groups of people in one category, but this was around the time like a number of activists were ending up dead. Remember, there was one activist was dead on the court floor. Like people, it was like weird happenings. So I just was like, you know what? Let me just focus on my economic work and dive deeper into that. But but one of the things that it did is like, there's a price for fighting for freedom. There's a price for, wanting everybody to have equal opportunity. If you're going to advocate for people that are in the rural communities, if you're going to advocate for people that are experiencing challenges, if you're going to advocate for Black people and people that have been historically disinvested in, then that there's the historical things. You can just look at history, what comes with that. So, I mean, I'm speaking about it very like casually now, but it still affects my wife a big way. But for me, it's like,
you can never forget. I mean, especially with her, she experienced it firsthand.
And the thing about it is you have to be mindful when you have a job or when you do things that you end up traveling. And so we think about it. I think about it's a conversation at the home, but it also shows you, the value of what's valuable and what's important, and also when you being effective.
Yeah, I mean, it shows
that's the thing.
It shows you're a threat.
If you're not being effective, you don't have to take certain security measures and other things. So, so in many ways, but what's funny about it is, I'm not gonna say funny. What's interesting about it, it didn't really change how I think about people.
Yeah,
like, I get stopped by police all the time, and I've only gotten 2 tickets in my life. And I've gotten stopped a lot. They always, for the most part, let me go.
Has it made you change the way you think about yourself?
In what way?
In any way. I mean, in that moment, you probably understood the value that you hold.
In that moment, I was more concerned with my wife's safety, because that's the thing, right? And then now we have kids. Like, I think about that. I think about, I think about these kids. I think about her more than I think about me, because I've been like that since like, you can ask all the people who I grew up with since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
You think about, I grew up in a civil war for the most part in
Yeah.
Haiti. And I used to always talk, like, so my dad came here on political asylum because he had to escape because he was fighting for democracy in Haiti. He got jailed, and they realized he didn't know how to read or write. So they're like, this can't be the guy funding the movement. So they let him go, and then he came here. And the very soldiers who arrested my dad, they used to escort me to school later on because, I was just a really smart kid. And I used to always go up to them and be like, oh, hey, try to start a conversation. And so I have that, like, grew up where I'm not afraid. Like, I'm really like that. And so it didn't make me scared. It made me feel like, oh, okay, then we doing something that's mindful, that's valuable, that people care about. But at the same time, I do think that you do have a responsibility to your family and to everything else. So most people who know about my organizing background, some people, I think the part too is there's a lot of people who are disappointed in me. I'll say that. I'll say that what I feel most days is that, and I'm trying not to get emotional about it, but I do feel that there are so many people across the country who want me to do more in the kind of political space, in the movement space, and all those things. And I really do feel how they feel. They think that, my voice would make a difference. They think that a lot of people would follow me to do those things. And I do feel that. And I do feel bad that I kind of, have overly indexed on the infrastructure piece. I have overly indexed on the economic piece of things. I do feel the pressure from people from, earlier this year. I'm trying not to get emotional.
No, it's okay. I can understand.
I was having a conversation with my dad and we were talking about kind of politics, and he had a very interesting point of view. And by the end of the day, he was like, okay, Jeff, you've convinced me to, change my mind. And I was like, oh, okay, good, whatever. We were having a heated conversations about at my wife's pulling up in the car. It's like, y'all good, me and my dad going back and forth. We going back and forth. It's just how me and my dad are. And he was like, by the end of the conversation, he was like, are you the one or should we wait for another? And that really hurt. Because it's like, I know what it means to kind of do the whole thing of the social aspect of it. It's a lot. And so I think what that situation of our car being blown up did, it made me more like, no, like this could happen, right? Like this is like not something in the movies or something that you hear about. You could not be here.
Yeah.
And, and the track record for folks who have actually been effective in bringing the consciousness of this country to what it could be and the longevity of their life, they're kind of not, it's not a long situation. So that is a reality that I think of, but I really do think of the folks who always ask me, like, are you going to run for office? Or are you going to do something? Like, I don't take it as they're annoying or they're tripping. It's like, I feel what they're saying. And also it's like, y'all know what that means. Like, I know what it means. And so, yeah, it's something that I think about, and, maybe we'll do something about it next year. Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows?
No, I can completely relate.
Yeah, my bad for
and
getting all emotional stuff.
No, that's okay. I can understand, and I'm gonna give you your flowers now because you are someone, honestly, I think. Like when I was younger and just growing up, I would look at people that were in the political positions and seats, and I would find them inspiring. And I still do, because I know the work that they've put in. But now in the last 7 years, working kind of alongside, politics and all of those things, I have learned it's people like you who are actually doing the work that matters.
Dang.
It's
people like us.
Yeah, people like us. I'll give it to you because at the end of the day, we come from environments where we understand what it means to work hard, have it, lose it, have it again, lose it, family, kids, wife, husband, mothers, fathers. So we put our blood, sweat, and tears and we're not looking for a title.
Yeah.
We might not even be looking for a seat at the
Yeah,
table. We
for sure.
building the table,
That's a fact, though.
you know?
That's a
And
fact.
so I think the work that you're doing is monumental, not on a local level, not on a national level, but like globally.
Oh, wow.
I think one day, you know, your kids are going to be doing speeches
Lord.
at schools.
Not the pressure you want to talk about. It's the pressure I'm talking about right here.
you know, your kids are going to be in their adulthood doing speeches at schools and talking about their father and the work that he's done, you know.
No, like you swear
and they
that
don't
means
have
a
to
lot.
say that, you know, my dad was a president or a senator or a congressman. Like, you know, they're going to be like, my dad was Jeff. And that's just going to hold enough weight, you know?
Ooh, like it's a lot of pressure because I
Yeah.
do feel in my heart that, again, I totally respect our elected officials and the work
Absolutely.
that they do.
Absolutely, yeah.
And at the same time, it's kind of like when I originally went to school for theology before I dropped out. Like, I have a deep respect for our religious leaders. But I feel like when you're leading one of those institutions, there's a script that you have to go by.
Yeah.
Even so, for example, even when there's a good idea, you can't really be all for it if the other side is for that same idea.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's things like that. No matter what side of the political aisle you're on, if you're caught saying that this is a good idea from these other people, now you've lost people, right? And I think the work that we do, we don't really care about red and blue. We care about results. We care about everyday people's lives changing, right? I'll talk to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't really care how nobody feel about that. It's people who will be like, oh, well, why are you engaged with or talking to? Listen, people need to put food on their table.
Right.
That's what I care about. Like, and to your point, like, we don't really care about the social consequences for doing the right thing and for working with people and for advocating for those businesses on Lake Street. No matter what, are you going to say, well, you know, I'm not going to talk to this city council member because like, I'm trying to make sure that these businesses have the investments that they need, that these families have the resources that they need. And to that point, that's why I do think our biggest change has to come from everyday people across industries, across culture, across sector. You know, we live in a world now where you have to be within your own tribe.
Yeah.
And as soon as you stepped out, now you might get canceled. And it's like, I'm not doing that. And I've never been that kind of, and you as well. And so it's kind of like, we about to do some stuff and we're going to make change. And that's what I'm just grateful for my family that really has allowed me to live like this because like our families really support us and, you know, especially the people so when you get all these awards, you get all these things, it's like, that's their award. You know, like you got to be brave, but you can't do it unless they're doing it. Like I think about all the times like my partner is with the kids and she's dope in her own right and has her own job, but like she really holds home down like in a way that's like, I don't have to worry about it. And so I could go out there and say things and she like come home, she's like, I wish you didn't say all that, but you said it and you believe it. And as long as you're saying what's in your heart, you know, move forward and keep pushing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's one thing I remember that I'll never forget that you said, and maybe we talked about this in the last episode, but I remember you were like, you used to look up to Martin Luther King. And then I remember you were like, Yusra, I don't want to be a Martin Luther King.
Yeah. I you know which line that I think captures that thought that you just brought on? It's a Jay-Z song. I think it's the H to the Izzo song, like Hova, where he says, Hov did that, so you didn't have to. And he's talking about how he did a bunch of things, but you're supposed to learn from him and not do what he did. He did all that so you didn't have to. And that's how I think about MLK. Like I've read every book written by MLK. I've read every major book written about MLK. And when you read when you go through his own personal journey, he realizes that like there's some things he could have did different. So I think we have to learn from that journey and we have to learn from our past and learn from our leaders. It's not I don't think we should reinvent the wheel, you know? And so I think we have to start from the work that our folks have done. We have to start where they left off. And I think too often we're trying to start over and so I think it's that like King did a lot of things. So we don't have to do what he did. We can take it to the next level. And I think I think that there was this, like, I don't know if you remember this documentary that came in like maybe 2008 or something like that. I don't know if I'm getting the year right. It was called Waiting on Superman. And it's kind of like how the education system, we're waiting on this person to fix the system.
Yeah.
And I think in general, people have been waiting for who will be like the next wave. Like, if you think about like the 60s, that was the golden age of like leaders really transforming our world. Yeah. And I don't know if you looked around in the world lately, it's about to be that time. I think 2025, as uncertain as it is, you're going to see a lot of leaders emerge to really change the face of what our world looks like. I think that there's going to be a lot of changes to systems. There's going to be a lot of changes to laws, but you're going to see a lot of people like make significant movements. I think we're going to live in the history. You know how we read the history books of what happened in the 60s and 50s and stuff like that? Not the same kind of things, but I think this is going to be the next generation of where our kids are going to read books and be like, oh,
all this stuff happened.
So I feel like there are a lot of people who are called to that. And I think God is, putting that in a lot of people's hearts, and it's going to look different. It's not going to be like the same things that happened then. But to that point, I don't think we should go and redo what was done. And listen, I'm not trying to get assassinated, fam. I'm just keeping it a G. I'm not living my life to be like, hey, y'all, hey, holla at me I'm trying to live a long life. Like what MLK said, in his last speech, I've watched MLK's last speech maybe like 400 times.
Wow.
Like I've been to the mountaintop. I pretty much got it memorized.
Yeah.
But in his last words, he was like, I might not get there with you, but we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm trying for all of us to get to the promised land. Like,
you're trying to see it with us.
I'm trying to see what it looked like. I'm trying to get there with all of us. I'm not trying to, I might not make it there with you.
Yeah.
So that's the part. It's that part.
Yeah.
Like, and I think we all can learn from one another. Like I tell you all the time, not just because we're on this podcast, but like I really look up to you. I really have a group of people who they're so great at what they do, and by being around them, we become better.
Yeah,
that's what really bothers me. Like I don't really focus on what's what people who are doing on sides that I don't agree with. The biggest problem for me that I find is the people who say they care about the things that we care about and our inability to work together. This idea that there can only be one. This idea that if you're great, I can't be. It's like, why? Like, why can't it be like the Avengers? Why can't all the great people work together? If we saying we're fighting against the greatest threat, imagine if you haven't watched the Avengers, I'm spoiling it for you. Imagine you watching the Avengers and they're going against Thanos or whatever, and one of them is like, nah, I'm gonna fight Thanos myself. And you're gonna get your behind whooped. It's like, who does that? That's what we do. Like it's like this, there could only be one, and like that's the part for me that just throws me off. Like I have a big ego about what I believe I can do. Like I believe in myself 100%. Like if you meet my 4-year-old son that's about to be 5, I try to be more like him every day.
I know he's confident.
Listen, I'm like that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like working with other people, I literally have no ego because what great thing has been accomplished that it hasn't been a team of all-stars?
Right.
Name one big thing. Like even in sports, like what great sports teams haven't been at least 3 Hall of Famers on the team? Like you never see it done. So as a people, that's where it bothers me a lot in some of the circles that I, used to be in, is this idea that there could only be one.
Yeah, me
and
too.
an inability for us to do what we're doing now, and an inability to have these kind of conversations and move forward and achieve greatness together. Like so, that's where I be getting hung up on that. But now, I tell MFers, don't waste my damn time.
Yeah.
If you on the BS and we gonna have this, that, it's like, don't even call me. I'm not coming.
Yeah. And you really not. You show up in spaces. You're very intentional about the spaces you show up at, and I admire that. Speaking of greatness, we're going to continue giving you your flowers.
Oh, Lord, not these flowers. Now you done gave me a bouquet.
No, this is actually really exciting. I'm not going to even spell it. I'll let you announce it. There's going to be some news coming out tomorrow. By the time this podcast drops, though, it'll already be out. But
oh, yeah. Like this year, I've made the Twin Cities Business Top 100.
Woo!
So, it was when they emailed me, I was like, oh, this is interesting. It's been a year where it's been a lot of, awards, a lot of the things that I've been doing for the last, decade. I'm being recognized for it. And
Top
I realized
100. You know how many people there is, and for you to be selected in top 100.
I mean, it's a blessing. Like, for real, it's a blessing. And I really do think it's a testament to the people that have opened doors for me in the last couple of years. I think never in my career have people open the doors that they've opened for me. In many ways, it's kind of been like we've been trying to imagine these big things and we're pushing it. But in the last couple of years, I've had people like Tanya Allen or Carla Henderson or Fawn Weaver, and, you know, people that have opened doors for me. Because in many ways, like I was telling you, it's like a lot of the people who I looked up to viewed me as competition. So they'd be like, you dope, but they'd never open a door.
Right.
And then this year, and then I'm also rising professional for finance and commerce. I got the Who's Who in America for business leadership. So it's been like
amazing.
This year's been
and it's all
big
like
year.
like you said, this is all, you know, testament of like the work
Yeah.
and also the people that you've connected with.
It's a lot of the people, because I tell anybody I've been the same person.
You
Like
have.
I'm a model of consistency. If you listen to the stuff I was saying when I was 15, I'm saying the same things now. So the value of others, and that's why I value people so much. You can be individually great as much as you want, but people have to open doors for you.
Yeah.
Like, people have to work with you. Like, you never can be great enough to overcome that you need other people. Like, so when people have this, you know, I'm gonna strap on my, you know, my own bootstraps and this other stuff. Even you allow me to come on your platform twice and having this kind of conversation, and like
it's my
your
pleasure.
growers, your viewership has grown, everything else is happening. You know, you've been doing this for over 5 years. Like, this is your sacred place. I know several people who've asked to come on your podcast who you're like, hey, you're not ready yet. Or, you know, you could come on next season. And then it's like the following season. So even, you know, opening space for us to even have this conversation, that you got me to talk about politics or something that I don't even do publicly.
I know.
Like, right?
I was like,
she said,
Jeff, can we talk about politics? You were you were like, don't get me in trouble
No,
now. I was like, no, we're just gonna touch.
We living in a time where come at me, holla at your boy. Like,
No,
it is
for
what.
real.
If y'all keep doing the same thing every year and keep saying a ism, y'all got to shut the hell up.
Yeah, I agree.
My bad if that was a strong take.
No, we've had cuss words on here all the time.
Y'all got to
That's
shut the
fine.
hell up. Like, don't come at me with, oh, well, you know, did you talk to the people? If you did all that and it didn't work, then that's different. And now y'all big mad crying and all kind of stuff. It's like,
yeah, you know what, the craziest part, not to like go back to the elections, but, you know, obviously I'm a Muslim person.
For sure.
And a big topic that was heavy this year was, you know, the war, the genocide in Palestine. And I saw, you know, fellow Democrats, because I've always voted blue for the most part, I'll be honest. And I've always sided with a lot of the issues on the left. But, and even now, I wasn't hoping that, you know, she would lose. But I was hoping for any type of hope, any type of remarks of change, her at least sitting down with anyone from the community.
I was about to ask you about that. Is it
know?
like, is it the results or just the lack of even talking with people?
It was a lack.
Engagement or sitting down and like,
It was.
let me know why you're thinking how you're thinking. Let me know why you think that. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it was the lack of, you know, any acknowledgement, sitting down with any community member, male, woman, young, old, just, you know, sitting down with someone. And so, but also stepping away from the Democratic, you know, people who were like actually in the political scene, but the Democratic Party voters or supporters, I found it so interesting how the following day after the loss, they were like, oh, we blame, you know, Muslims, and now Trump is gonna blow up the whole entire, like, we hope you guys all
for real that happened.
Yeah, like, we hope you guys all die now because this is what you get. Oh, it was so
Yo,
bad.
that's so
and
wild.
It was
you see how like clueless I am not being in the community. Like, I didn't even see that.
It like completely.
I heard people blaming white women. I didn't hear that part.
No, it was a huge, and like, yeah, there's people blaming.
Yeah, but I didn't hear that.
Latinos,
Like, legitimately, I didn't hear that part.
A lot like, well, this is what you guys get now. We hope that you guys all die and this and this and that. And I just thought it was so interesting how people's true colors happen just because not all the Muslims voted for blue this time, and it was like we fumbled the elections. But I mean, they were blaming all the other.
No, for sure, but still, like, that's still.
Too.
I mean, that's still deeply personal in the sense of when you have family members who have been affected, when you have family members who have lost their lives. I feel like that's where for me is. My thing is, is it not as a leader, is it not worth the conversation?
Exactly.
That was like my whole thing with the election. The inability to talk with people and answer the tough questions. Whether that's on camera or not. Like, I understand you might make decisions that I don't agree with, but can you tell me why you're making those decisions? Can we have these conversations? And we're not even willing to do that. And for me, that's a level of disregard. That is a level of disregard that I think voters will make you pay for in 2024 that they wouldn't have made you paid for in 2012 100%. Or 2008. And it's like, nah, you know, and then my thing was post-election. Do y'all think it's helpful to be just so it's your fault? Whatever groups you want to blame, do you think it's going to make that group vote for y'all more next time? If your reaction is, you know, it's your fault why we lost, it's your fault. How about it's their fault they didn't connect with those people?
Exactly. And
so now it's like, okay, if you're trying to appeal to Latino men, is this the way to go about it? If you're trying to appeal to the Muslim community, is this the way to go about it? If you're trying to appeal to white women, is this the way you go about it? If you're trying to appeal to the black men who they still voted 78% Democrat. But a lot of people didn't go out and vote. Is this how you motivate people to go out and vote? By blaming them for what the loss was? And this is like the ideology that I'm talking about. That it's like, fam, y'all think this is effective? Like, y'all really think this is effective? So we just live in a world where I'm a believer in talking to people and seeing where they're coming from. Like, I don't mind. I'll go talk to anybody.
Absolutely. And
I'll go to rural West Virginia, which I'll go to rural area where people may not have ever engaged with a person my age and that look like me. But it's like, I want to know, like, when they say, you know, we need to do renewable energy, when we say that, like, how does that affect you? And your family been doing coal for the last 5-6 generations. Like, I want to know what that means to you. Like, and I genuinely want to know that. Like, I think you can't dismiss people just because you have different experiences of them, you have different opinions than them. It's like, then don't be their leader. Like, if you're gonna lead people, if you're gonna lead with people, I think it's important for you to not think you know better than them. And that's where I think that's the biggest issue. And then I'm not about to blame. Like, listen, I run a business. I run several businesses. Am I ever gonna blame my customers for not buying my product? Like, it's your job to figure out how to better communicate to your customers. That's why I like business. I'm not even gonna lie. I like business because that bottom line hits you hard.
Right. It does.
That bottom line will tell you what you need to do different. Like, if it ain't selling, he will be like, I never understood. I know this off topic, whatever. One of the things I never understood was when people be getting mad, their friends and family don't support their business. It's like, is it valuable to their friend? So they just supposed to support you because you their friend? They supposed to support you because you their cousin? No. Do you have a valuable product that they want? Like, I'd never blame my friends for not supporting me. I've never asked a friend to support my business. Never. Or a family member, hey, can you support my business? I'd be like, hey, this is a value if you want to come. Like, when I used to do the Humans Get Together events, it's like, hey, this is a dope event. If you want to come through. I never say, come because of Jeff. Like, come because it's going to be valuable for you. So that's why I like that, like, business, because you can measure if you being effective or not.
Absolutely.
And you know what you're going to do if you're not? You're going to change your message. You're going to change your product. You're going to change whatever.
You go back to
and so that's where I feel like we got to go back to the drawing board and stop blaming other people for you being trash. Like,
point blank.
Stop. Who does that? It's this. We only do that in politics. And now we live in a space where before we do anything important, people going to ask you who you voted for. It's like, bro,
that doesn't matter. Ask me what I voted for.
You get what I'm saying? But you see, but it's like, could try to see, well, did you vote for that person? Like, did you, like, it's like, even now in this interview, I ain't say who I voted for because it's funny. I know who I voted for, but it's pretty funny. Like, a lot of people gonna make assumptions on who I voted for. Like, why? Because I'm saying that these folks didn't do their job. That don't really indicate that I didn't vote for that person, or I didn't vote at all. But that's like kind of like how we live in a world where people are going to decide to listen to you based off of what they think you think.
Exactly. Selective hearing too. Yeah.
So, dang, we done had like a really good conversation.
We did. I'm like, have we been talking for 2 hours now?
We like probably like an hour and 10 minutes, hour and 10 minutes and an hour 11.
This is a valuable conversation. And I know that we can like talk for hours and hours. Well, first of all, what can we look forward to in 2025? Well, people got to follow you. I know you can't give too much away, but People gotta follow you.
Yeah.
Your social media.
What is my
pages.
social media? Is my
It's
Instagram
at
Jeffrey Aggy?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
at Jeff Aggy, and I'll put it. I always link
Okay,
everything
alright.
to my pages.
And don't say a guy. It's Aggie.
I
Like,
thought I said Aggie.
no,
Oh,
you
for
didn't say-
others. Oh, yeah.
And the way that they spell Aggie, you know what I'm saying?
Jeff
Like,
Aguy.
don't do me like that now.
Yes. No, Jeff Aggy. I mean, we have to follow you. You've got some big things on the way. I mean, obviously you've got your awards, your recognitions, but you're going to be doing some more impactful work coming forward.
Yeah, next year is going to be the biggest year of my life. So next year I'm putting all of my life's work together into something. I'm still praying about it, still thinking through it with my family. As I mentioned earlier, because of the challenges that happened 7 years ago, there's a lot of considerations for what to do next. But, I work on this really huge project right now. That's probably going to be the only project that I move forward in 2025 because, I'm getting ready for the biggest thing of my life and it's the biggest thing of my life because I think it can impact so many people. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. As we make more decisions and think through it, we'll probably kind of announce what it is. And, I'm looking forward to it. But just know that it's going to include really traveling the country and talking to people, talking to everyday people and their issues and getting a deep understanding of how we come to solutions. How do we come to solutions that are going to affect more people? Yeah. And, I think it's something that the country wants. I think that people are tired of being blamed across the board. I think people are tired of the doom and gloom across the board. I think people are ready to hope again. I think that people are ready to reclaim the American dream or what's left of it. I think people are looking for certainty of what the future might bring. I think people are looking for the hope, a real hope, not just a joy that's based out of just me smiling, but joy that I do believe if we work hard enough, we can come to the solutions that we want to see. And I'm like, I believe in what I'm like. I believe it. Like, it's like one of those things where, when people say, what are you willing to die for? I'm willing to die for these beliefs. And I don't want to die for it, though. Like, let's be clear about that, y'all. I said, I don't want to die, but like, I really believe it that deeply. And, I get a chance to talk to people. Like, I'll give you a little quick story real quick. I know, we spent a lot of time talking.
We got time.
But there's this guy named Julian. He's in a fellowship that I'm a part of. It's called New Bridge. It's this fellowship between the U.S. and Germany that, now I've just been voted the chair of it. So that's pretty cool. Super cool. But there's this guy named Julian. He's from West Virginia. He's an attorney. And, he's really changed my life because, like, he's from rural America. He was like, we're having a conversation and he was telling me, like, did you know that there's no city in West Virginia that has more than 50,000 people? Think about it. Think about there's no city that has more than 50,000 people. And he was talking about how a lot of the industries came with coal and everything else, but then everybody left. Like, a lot of these companies left. And how we're in this program together, and he was like, someone like me would never be in this program. He's a white guy. Yeah. A white guy attorney. And now he works for a larger firm, but before he used to work for a smaller firm. And he was like, before this program, I would never think to expand to be that big. And I'm like, here's this guy from West Virginia who sounds like, if we're in Minnesota, we live in North, like Minnesota, it sounds like somebody from North Minneapolis telling their story. And it made me realize, you know what, we're really not that different. Yeah. And like, it really profoundly had an impact on me where I began to realize that our stories are more similar than we think, but we don't even have an opportunity to have those conversations because we make assumptions based off of what we look like,
and
who we worship,
in a box,
and where we live. And I fundamentally believe that the American dream is possible for all people. So that experience had a really big impact on my life this year, and it's really affecting how I think about what we can do nationally. And I believe we can start off small, but I know it's going to be really big. I know that when my story is done, I don't know when that's going to be. Hopefully it's when I'm a very old person and maybe they have, like, by then AI has made it so we could live forever. But, what I want to do in my life is when the story of the world is told, I don't necessarily want to be a paragraph, but I at least want to be a sentence. Like, it's like you can't tell the story of human history without talking about what we did in 2025, 2026 and beyond. That's what I'm chasing. Like, that's what greatness is to me. Greatness is, it's like when you think about the Hall of Fame for sports, you can't tell the story of basketball without talking about Michael Jordan or LeBron James or Kobe Bryant and those people. Like, that's how I want us to be at life. And I fundamentally believe that, you know, whatever we aim for, even if we fall short of it, we can get really close. Yeah. And for me, I think it's possible to have a renaissance of, I think America fundamentally is an idea. Now, how we got to that idea, for different, depending on how you identify, it might not have been the best. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. A lot of folks who were the founding fathers did a lot of things that, you know, were very harmful and challenging, especially to folks who, you know, originally lived on this land. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a fact. You can't gloss over that. Mm-hmm. The reality, though, is America's the first and only country founded on an idea. And I think that that is powerful. And every generation, there are people who have risen to make America live closest to that idea. And if you think about it, those are the people who we look up to the most. It's the Martin Luther Kings of the world. Those are the people who we look up to the most. And what I believe that in this generation, we have the opportunity to, for real, make it so that no matter where you're from or what you look like, that you have a real opportunity to life, to liberty, and to pursue happiness. And I think we have a big crisis right now. The biggest crisis is that I can't think of the person who feels like they can pursue happiness deeply. And if I can think of the person, there are only very few. Mm-hmm. And we also live in a place where it's like this idea of liberty, where you have government overreach telling you how to live or what you can do, or, you know, what you can do about your health choices. Like, that's not liberty. And then life is not just enough about kind of existing, it's about living. And so many people are living paycheck to paycheck, not to any fault of their own, but because wages haven't grown and things are stagnant. And so I fundamentally believe in this idea that we can continue to make more perfect. And I think in this generation, it's going to be our time to make that happen. And I think there's nobody better positioned than the people like us. There's nobody better positioned than everyday people. And I think it's going to change America, and I think it's going to change the world. And like I told you, you know, hope you're ready for 20 years from now when they be like, oh, you know, that Yusra, you know what I'm saying? I'm going away. It's going to be like, what? It's going to be first Muslim woman to do whatever. First Somali woman to do whatever. It's going to, like, yeah. No, for real though. And I know several people like that. So, you know, I'm not trying to say I'm Nick Fury, because, you know, I want to have superpowers too. Yeah. But I will say we building the Avengers. We are. And we're going to see what it look like. And I can't wait for more people to, damn, I feel like I made the decision in this podcast. We're going to have to do it. Yeah. Like, I can't tell y'all when and where, but 2025, be on the lookout.
Okay. You know me.
Damn, you had me all in my feels. I felt like I was connected to God in that moment. I was like, where's this coming from? It's coming. So
hey, that's what Eat and Talk does.
But where the food at though?
Listen, you are the food, okay? The conversation.
I've seen we people in Eat and Talk have food.
I already know not to bring food to any episode with you, because I already know how these conversations will go.
Like, why is it that
I'm fulfilled?
I'm like, God, whatever you did for the others, can you do it for me? And I know it ain't gonna be no third time.
Jeff is my friend in real life, so he eats good, okay, outside of this podcast. So, all
right,
yeah. Even though he didn't eat the camel meat with me the other day.
Hey, why you had to put that on the, you know, cut this out the podcast.
No, I appreciate you so much. And again, we always, still a tradition, end the episode with one last question, which is, what piece of advice could you leave with us today?
I don't know if it's about a piece of advice, but it's what I've been reflecting on. You know, if it wasn't possible, you wouldn't be able to imagine it. And I think that that's really big, because so many times we're told that our ideas are too big, too bold, or who are you to accomplish that, or it seems impossible. And one of the things that I've learned, and you said like since March of 2023, we look like children. Yeah. We look like kids. And it's only been like, 18 months or something like that, or 19 months. But it's because we've grown so much. A lot of the things that I thought were impossible, I'm doing right now. And so my kind of reflection is on whatever you can imagine, you can achieve. And not just from like a cheesy, if you could think it, you could be it. But really, have you ever like really sat down and thought about you at your best, you at your brightest, you at your happiest, and then think about what it's going to take to get there? I think just the act of doing that makes that future a lot more likely. I believe that, you know, time, past, present, and future is in many ways a construct. And sometimes when we have dreams, it's just bringing about some of that possible future into our present. And so if God brought it to your mind, then that means that it is really possible. And so, and this is where maybe the piece of advice comes from, is that I encourage you to look for that part of you and dwell on that. Yeah. Like, who are you at your biggest? Who are you at your brightest? Who are you at your most unapologetic? And I know the fear is you might lose some people along the way because that version of you, everybody's not suited for. But I promise you that the person you'll become will be the hero you've always wanted to see. And if you are thinking about, I want to be like this person, I want to be like that person, when you really think about it, it's just the version of you that's unapologetic. And so I encourage you to find them, find her, find him, and live that life and see where it goes. And then let me know on my socials, like, how was it for you?
I love it. Okay, so when am I having you next? 2026?
Oh, hey, listen.
Listen.
Hey, we might be doing it. If it's 2026, we might be doing this podcast. You know what I'm saying? It might look a little different. It might look. First of all, I got to give a shout out to the podcast studio, y'all. This podcast is lights.
Split Second Productions.
The production.
Yeah. Well, that's their name, Split Second Productions. Yes.
The producers for this show, listen, the used were dope. And they the real MVP.
They are. Like, all I do is I sit. I look pretty and I talk.
I came in here like, I was like,
that's how I do.
I felt like I should have wore something different. You know, like maybe the same colors, but I should have wore a suit. It's real player in here.
Yeah, so it's nice.
It's nice.
No, shout out to both my Mohammeds. I love them. They're my brothers. They have been riding with me. Was it over a year now? So
yeah, I couldn't. See what I was talking about? Teamwork. You need that.
Yeah,
because when I be watching the podcast, I'd be like, who do her stuff? Listen, that's why I wore this color. I was like, it looked good with my skin. You know, I want them saying, I want the angle that the other guy had when he was talking.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
I was like, I want that. And it's like, oh, it's the Mohammeds who do that.
It's the Mohammeds. It's the Mohammeds. Shout out to
do me right.
Do me right now. Yes. I include them in all my reels. So check them out if you're looking for a dope studio space. This is the place to go to.
All right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. This was phenomenal conversation. Honestly, I can't even put words to it. And I really appreciate you making time out of your busy ass schedule to come and sit down and talk to us. And I look forward to seeing everything that we're going to do.
Oh, yeah. You got to be involved. Don't be saying all that and then you're not involved.
I'm going to say we. No, I'm involved.
Is it real? Is it real if she don't say yes?
No. I said yes. I'm on the team. So I'm looking forward. So again, I'm going to make sure that I put your socials on here. And yeah, follow Jeff, you guys, and see how his journey of how he's going to change this world.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Thank you for watching,
my
everyone.
social score just went up 100%. Okay?
Listen. It did, both of ours. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you guys next time.